Where will the UK stock market be at the end of this year? Well, that's a really difficult thing to predict, but there are lots of investment companies, experts that have tried to do just that. And the companies like AJ Bell, UBS, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, Motley Fool all predict that the stock market, the FTSE 100, will be roughly around about 9,000 points, which if it is, it's fantastic news for us because it could help to improve our investments and bring our accounts up. And despite the fact it's difficult to predict, you can see signals or signs throughout the year that's going to have an impact on where the stock market might be. And it's not just in the UK, because the UK stock market is influenced by the whole world. And it also depends on what's happening in Europe, in China, in USA, and other places around the world. And I think it's already started, because if you look at house builds currently, house builds are falling. So the building of new houses is going down, and that's possibly because the tax on stamp duty has changed. So you pay stamp duty above £300,000 now, and that's all changed. So I think that's part of what was happened in the budget in the UK has sort of had an impact on house building. And that's particularly important to me and possibly for the whole economy, because it suggests that when house building is deflated, that means the economy is deflated and things aren't looking so good. And if you've been following my channel, you'll know that I've bought Taylor Wimpey with the view that the government are planning to build 1.5 million homes over their 5-year term, which is now 4.5 years. Unfortunately, they've got off to a pretty bad start because obviously house building's dropped off. And really, if they are going to achieve 1.5 million, they really needed a good start, because it's going to be a very stretched target.
Britain rebuilt with 1.5 million new homes.
That as an indication of how difficult things are now and how difficult things are going to be in the first, let's say, 6 months, because we've got a flurry of taxes that have started in January. And of course, as we know, in April, we've got the national insurance change, we've got council taxes rising up to 5%, and we've got things like TV licenses going up in the UK. All these taxes are going up. And the national insurance one is probably going to be the biggest, in that the headline or the number that mainstream media tell us is that it's going at 1.2%. But of course, if you think about it carefully, it's also going from the thresholds going from 10,000 down to 5,000. And if you can imagine, lots of small businesses are employing people on minimum wage, which is going up as well, then that let's say it's an additional 20%, was what I worked at my mind, possibly additional 20% above that 1.2%, which companies are going to have to pay. So it's much, much more than 1.2%, and I don't think people have really discussed that. So that is likely to have an impact on the UK stock market. So based on just the taxes that's coming the way to the UK, my view is that I expect the stock market, at least for the first 6 months, to be really turbulent and struggling. And I think for us, people who are trying to trade the UK stock market, it's going to be very, very difficult. Now, what compounds all of that and makes it all worse is the fact that Europe is doing poorly at the moment. So the German manufacturing, French debt is all really not good at all. And that's partly due to the fact that China is not doing very well and their economy is dropping because of their housing crisis. And because China are not doing well, they're not buying goods from Europe. And that means Europe don't have as much money, so they're not buying goods and services for the UK. So you can only imagine, at least for the first half of the year, not only is the UK going to be struggling, so is Europe and China. And then the other big thing that's going to happen in the world, potentially in the economies, is that in just over a week's time, Donald Trump takes over, and he's suggested that he's going to put tariffs at least on Mexico and Canada and China. And of course, although Mexico and Canada don't influence our stock market as much, if he does put tariffs on China, which might push China a little bit further behind, which might mean they won't buy more goods from Europe, and then the knock-on effect to be the UK as well. So if you look at all these things that are coming up in the world, things are not looking good, at least for the coming 6 months. Now, another thing that could have a really big impact on the UK stock market is the AI bubble that's taking place in the S&P 500 in the US, where the Magnificent Seven have just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And you see lots and lots of people speculating that that bubble is going to burst eventually. And that equally depends on what Donald Trump does. So if Donald Trump makes the wrong moves, he could burst that bubble that's taking place. Although most analysts look like they're predicting that definitely for the next 6 months that's going to keep rising. So that might help and maintain the UK stock market. But if it does burst, then that could be a catastrophe for all of us. So that's something to be very, very aware of. But if it does burst and it goes down, then that gives us an opportunity to buy at a low price. So that could be a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive. So yeah, so I believe, based on what I've read and my own thoughts, is that at least for the first 6 months of this year, things are going to be difficult and the stock market is going to struggle. And what I think might happen is that once the tax rises come in and business get used to them, then the second half of the year, at least from August, September onwards, that's where we might see the gains in the FTSE. So I predict a really tough time in the first half of the year. It might be much worse because inflation looks like it's going up, and that means interest rates won't come down, or they might even go up. And even worse than that, inflation in the UK is 2.6%, but food inflation is edging towards 5% now. And if you think about that, we all need food. We all need food to be cheap. But if that's going up, that's going to affect how much people can spend, how much they've got in their pockets. Yeah. So all in all, it could be a tricky start, but hopefully towards the end of the year, we will make those gains that these experts are predicting. I'll have a quick look at my account just to give you a very quick update on where I stand today, because there's a graph that I've just seen that actually looks quite interesting. So let's have a look. So here's my account, and I'm currently at £319 dead. If we have a look at the chart for the last week, I think it was quite interesting. The week started out relatively interestingly. It was okay. I was up. I was on 326, and then over the last few days, it's just dive bombed. It's gone right down to here. It's like back right down to 316. Since then, it has picked up a little bit, but then it's dropped off again, which is pretty dismal, really. But if I had a look at the full year chart, so what's happened in the last full year, I've consistently done quite well. Periods of time when it's got up further and further. But the interesting thing is, pretty much since around budget time, 318.20, my account hasn't moved. It's still where it is. So in the last sort of 3 months since that budget, since the Chancellor has put all those taxes on business and done what they've done, it's really stopped any forward motion whatsoever. So if you looked at the previous 9 months, I've had a reasonably steady upward trajectory, and it's just died to death now. It's not, this week has been horrendous. It's been probably my worst week of trading. And as you can see, I've got all sorts of stuff in the red. Yesterday, everything was down almost double, more than 1%. It's been awful. And Taylor Wimpey now, exactly as I said about house building, Taylor Wimpey is down a minus £6. So it looks like I'm going to be keeping Taylor Wimpey for quite some time. And yeah, so I've got over £100 to invest. I haven't done it yet, so I'm going to wait until the time is right, until once this goes down, by a big amount, that's when I'm going to look to invest. But yeah, that's where I am. That's where my account is today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it interesting and informative. And if you have, why don't you give it a like? That would be amazing. And if you're enjoying this finance content I'm trying to create, then why not subscribe to the channel? It's free and just have to click the button. That would be amazing too if you did that. Thank you very much again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.